Phoenix Lily. If you haven't been here before, welcome to my channel. So today's video is about video game design college. I've mentioned this previously. I am currently a video game design student. Technically, I'm a game programming student. I go to a college in the United States. I am in my final year, my senior year. So today we're going to be talking about if game design college is right for you. If you hear some noise in the background, my cat is playing with stuff on my floor. Let's get down to business. The first thing you need to do is ask yourself, why do you want to go into game development? You like playing video games? Because there are a lot of people who like playing video games, and developing games is not the same. So if you clicked on this video, that means you are interested in potentially going into game development as a college major and future career. If you're unsure, there are a few things I want you to ask yourself. One, do you want to go into video game development just because you like playing games? I can tell you from experience of my past 4 years, game development is nothing like playing video games. If anything, I have less time to play video games now that I'm in school. So besides liking video games, why do you want to go into it? Do you like analyzing mechanics? That's a common one I find people who like design and programming tend to do. They want to know how games are made, what goes into them, what are the numbers, what are the systems behind the games. So that's a really common one. Another one is liking programming, which is what my specialty is. I like programming, but I wanted to go into something a little more creative than just normal computer science, so game development was right for me. Same goes for art, sound design, and the more creative stuff. Another thing to consider is, do you like working on teams? Because social interaction and teamwork is really important for game design. If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you have the potential of doing really well. If you answered no, you still have the potential. You just may want to consider why you want to go into game design. Now that that's out of the way, let's go a little bit into the specialties and what they cover. I'm not going to go into all of the specialties, but I am going to cover the ones I think that are the most common and basic for you to understand before you decide yourself what you want to specialize in. The first one, the major one, game design. There are two smaller parts to game design. There is narrative and there is system. Narrative is creating the story, the characters, and the world behind the game. Systems are creating the mechanics that make the game run. Both are equally important, but they have different skill sets. Usually narrative is more aligned with art because it's more, not necessarily more creative, but it's a different type of creativity. While systems has to deal with game feel. So if the game feels good, I'm sorry, Pascal is going crazy on my bed right now. There he is. So systems has to do with game feel and kind of the numbers. You think programming is the numbers, but designers also have to deal with them. So if those are things you're interested in, you should look into game design programs. The next one I want to talk about is business. Like game design, there are two main specialties I see. One is team management, the other one's marketing. So team management's they're both pretty self-explanatory, but team management is dealing with team conflicts, it's managing people, making sure people log their hours. It sounds pretty simple, but it's a lot of work. You get to learn more about, different business models, the difference between waterfall and agile, which I can get into in another video if you guys are interested in that. Marketing is pretty self-explanatory. You sell the games. If you're really interested in looking into demographics, or you're curious about what type of people like what games, what are the underlying things about games that people like, you should check out marketing majors. But also there's a website that we use in my school called Quantric Foundry. I will link it below. You basically take a quiz. It tells you kind of learn what aspects of games appeal to you. I really like it. It's a super quick quiz and you get to learn a little more about yourself. So if you're interested, links down below. I have no sponsorship with them. I think next up I'm going to talk about programming. I could talk about programming for hours, and again, comment below if you want to. I just want to know what you guys are interested in learning about. For me, the first sign I think I was more programming oriented than art was how much I liked math and how much I liked puzzle solving. So if that sounds like you, programming might be the way to go. It is frustrating at the beginning because it is a different way of thinking and problem solving. There is a learning curve, and at one point you're just gonna have a click and everything's gonna make sense. If you are interested in programming but you don't have the resources, there is a website called Code Academy. Again, no sponsorship. I will link their C++ course down below. Our next section is art. Art is a lot of work. There is a very high burnout, same with programming. Art is pretty self-explanatory. You make the models, you make the sprites, you make the animations, you can make graphics. There are a lot of specialties, but I'm not going to go into them. The one thing I would warn you about is make sure you have a backup plan. As far as I know, artists tend to get fired and cycle through a lot in the game industry. There's, like I mentioned, very high burnout, but it can be very, very rewarding. So look into at your own risk. Next one I want to cover is sound design. Sound design is more than just composing music. It's very similar to sound design for movies. You need the music to match the feeling, the psychology, what you want the player to feel, pretty much. So if you're interested in the psychology behind sound design, video games is a really great way to play around with that. I'm sorry, he is just... Look at him. Look at him. Hi, you're on camera. The last part I am going to talk about is something that people don't really talk about, and usually we joke that this isn't considered a real job. It's QA testing, quality assurance testing. That's different from what you hear beta testers, alpha testers. These are people whose jobs it is to test games. And before you think, oh, I want a career playing games, that's not what it is. It's different than that, so I'm gonna explain. So testing as a career involves a lot of repetitive stuff. You are trying to break the game. So if you're someone who likes breaking games, it might be something for you. But again, you are going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again until all bugs are fixed that, you guys find. And then if you find a bug, you have to do heavy documentation as to how that bug occurred, so programmers and designers can tackle it accordingly. You have to have really good communication and writing skills for that role, and it's usually not paid well. It's also not really considered a real job, but for people who love it, it's incredibly rewarding. So if you want to go into QA testing, you most likely will want to get a game design degree. You don't have to, you just need to understand the process, but game design or programming is probably what you want to go for, and then in the industry look specifically for QA jobs. Now that you kind of have a basic understanding of all the different divisions, I wanted to go over some tips for looking for colleges. Now, I've only been to one college, but I remember the process, and these are some things that I considered when choosing my school. So 1, avoid schools that are actually businesses. The big one that I can think of is Full Sail University. It has university in the name, but the point of it isn't to be a school, it's to make money off of you. And you may say, but a lot of schools just want to make money off of you. Full Sail is a scam. I know there are a few people who like it, but everyone I know who went there didn't learn things. They were super stressed out and they felt like it stole their money. So this is from my experience and my friends' experiences. So try to avoid it if you can. That being said, there are also other types of schools I think you should avoid. Again, I want to be clear, this is from my experience. Try to avoid schools that only have game design. There are 2 reasons for this. 1, it usually means that school hasn't had the major for very long. And 2, it doesn't allow you to work on teams effectively. So I'm going to explain them. First, it means the major hasn't been around for very long. Usually schools who only have game design as a major wanted to come on board the train. There are a few schools that have been doing it for a long time, and they typically have more majors. The reason you want a school that has more majors and more experience, it means that the program is tested more. You're not a guinea pig, And I'm not saying that newer programs aren't good, but they're not as well tested, and that can be scary, or you may not get, a good experience out of it. The other reason, like I mentioned, you want to look for schools that have multiple majors. And what I mean by that is it's not just game design. They can have at least one other major, so game programming, game business management, game art is a really common one as well. And the reason you want this is because you want team practice. if you're all game designers and you have to be put on a team, somebody's gonna have to be a programmer, somebody's gonna have to be an artist, somebody's gonna have to manage the team. You're not doing the role that you signed up for. And again, other schools can manage it probably pretty well, but it's not the same. If you all signed up to be game designers, you should all be game designers. The third tip I want to say is manage your time. This is not something you just like want to do when you're in college. Start in high school, start in middle school. It's a big mistake I made. Game addiction is real. Do not spend all of your time playing video games, because when you get to college, you will actually want friends. I'm not saying that you don't have friends. I didn't really have friends. But you will want to spend more time with other people. You will have a ton of homework. You will have time for video games, but not nearly as much as I think high school allowed me to play specifically. So make sure you work on that. Tip 4 is be careful who you hang around with. In college, especially one that you're working on teams a lot, this has to do with like the teamwork and stuff. Your reputation means everything. If you have a good reputation, when you graduate school, your former classmates may recommend you at jobs. If you have a poor reputation, people will not like you and it will be harder for you. And the reason it's so important, at least at my school, is the way it's structured is we have production classes every single year. Not every semester, but every year. And our final production class, which is the entire of senior year, we have to choose our own teams. And the people who had terrible reputations got on terrible teams. And I know from experience, everyone's dreading working with them. So along with that reputation, the final tip, I guess, is if you are a woman, if you are LGBTQ+, or if you are a person of color, you may want to think twice about joining this industry. And I say this as a woman, I say this as multiracial, I'm Latina, and I'm telling you, it sucks. And, you know, if you're not any of those things, if you're a cis white male, don't worry, you have to listen to this tip too. It's very important. And I'll explain why it's important for you a little bit later. But God, honestly, the mistreatment is so real. The discrimination is so real, and it's not like hate crimes. It's always the small things. It's, especially as a woman, it's other team members talking over me, and then I have to compensate by talking over other people. It's, you know, getting your idea shot down. It's assuming that you aren't as good as a programmer because you're a girl. It's disgusting. It's, you know, seeing all of the main characters of all of the video games that come out of your school be white, you know, and like I'm white, but God, I want some freaking diversity, please. Please. And I know for some of my African American classmates, they were in shock coming to our school being surrounded by white men. You know, it's kind of weird. And as a woman, you know, you have to deal with the stalking, the harassment, you know, people not knowing social skills. So it's serious. You have to consider, are you strong enough to put up with it? Because sometimes I don't think I am. And if any of you men are still here, I hope I didn't, you know, alienate you. This lesson is important for everyone. And the reason is, like I said, reputation's important. I have classmates who go above and beyond to make sure that all women on the team feel comfortable, all people on the team feel comfortable about their race and that they're not going to be discriminated against. And those people I talk about a lot because they're good classmates. So if you aren't part of a minority, try to work on your biases and try to be really kind and compassionate to people, because the bar is really low, and if you exceed that bar, you're gonna reap the rewards. And I know that sounds selfish, it's like only be nice to people for your own benefit, but you gotta start somewhere, honestly. And I guess the final thing for today I wanted to talk about is how to convince your parents that this is a worthwhile thing. I had it easy. My parents used to work for a fashion company, so going into a industry like this wasn't that strange, you know, for me. But I know for a lot of people, convincing their parents that game development is a viable field is really hard. So here are a few things that you can tell them that I told you that are things to consider. 1, teamwork is invaluable for every industry you go into. It's incredibly valuable for the game industry because you're constantly working on teams, but most industries have some sort of teamwork, and the skills you learn in school about managing projects will really help you in the long run. Even if you don't go into the game industry, those skills are invaluable. And I know I have applied for jobs just because I have experience working on a development team. Jobs that if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have gotten considered called that for a second interview. So it really does help. Another one, if you want to go into programming, not gonna flex or anything, but basically a game programming major is a software engineer. You can go into any field. In this time of a pandemic and quarantine and remote learning and remote business, we gonna need technology. So your skills as a programmer will be applicable anywhere. Same with art, but mostly if you go into like more of graphic design, more UI art, you can do that for websites, you can do that for apps, and business is business, like I said before. So those are things to consider and tell your parents. I would say another thing is a lot of game companies now have stocks. It's like a legit business. So if you do research into the business side of it and show your parents how good of an investment it is, that will be good. There are some things that are not so good in the industry that you should avoid telling your parents if you're passionate about, but do keep in mind that a lot of major game companies mistreat their workers. There is no union in the United States. Canada is working on it, but there's no union for game developers in the United States. Like I said with artists before, they usually get cycled out a lot. Programmers, somewhat designers, somewhat producers, and like business people, not so much. But it's really scary. You should probably aim for a mid-tier company or an indie company. You will have more creative freedom and you will probably have more fun, honestly. But those are things to consider. So that's all for today. If you really like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Click that subscribe button down below. Make sure you click that bell notifications too to make sure you always know when I post videos. If you want to ask me any questions, recommend any videos that I should make, put it in the comments below or message me on Twitter or Instagram. If you're interested in talking to me live, you should check out my Twitch channel at PhoenixLily99. I will see you guys in 2 weeks for more video game videos. Have a good week.